going to fly through these quickly, but one of the things we want to drive home again is you should always know what tack you're on. And that seems kind of obvious, but sometimes when I race and sail with people, I'll be like, hey, what tack are we on? And it takes about 3 or 4 minutes for somebody to be like, starboard. And then it's sort of again, right? So let's go through quickly here. Boat A and B. Boat A.
Vortex.
Thank you. Boat B.
Starboard.
Nice. Boat C is head to wind. There is no such thing as a you're not on a tack, right? So you're on a tack. It is still on port. You are on that port tack until you go past head to wind. All right, what about boat D? Boat D is backing their main. Look at where the wind is.
Port.
Port.
Oops, sorry. It is on a port tack. When you're going upwind, it's about where the wind is. Okay, that's confusing because it's not the same for downwind. So what about boat E? Or E is a starboard, on the starboard tack, because the leeward side is defined as where your boom is. The windward side is the other side, and so in this case, it's about the boom and not the wind. So if you're sailing by wind, so it gets a little confusing going downwind. All right, what tack are boat F and G on? Okay, which one has right of way?
F.
Why?
Lured.
Thank you. Nice. Excellent. So we can fly through our next couple of sections. Okay, so today we're going to recap John and Ian's lecture from about a month ago, which was spectacular. Go through our race structure very quickly, especially given that we have mostly experienced racers in here. Talk about some communication, and then we're going to really focus today on starts. Okay, so a recap of the rules. We're going to go through these as well. Number 1, who has right of way, and more importantly, why? So which color and why?
Orange, starboard tack.
Very nice. When boats are on different tacks, it is always starboard over, not always, sorry. It is starboard over port. How about number 2? And why?
Lured.
Excellent. Boats on the same tack and overlapped, leeward over windward. Number 3.
Green. Right away, are we asking?
Right of way. Purple is the correct answer, but why?
I thought purple was overtaking. I was giving it a
Purple is leeward, right? So if your leeward side is defined where your boom is, anything on that side is leeward of you. So wherever your boom is pointing, they have right of way, not you. Okay, number 4, upwind, downwind situation.
Blue.
Why does blue have right of way?
Starboard tack.
They're both on a starboard tack, though. Pink is also on a starboard tack. So both boats are on starboard.
It's leeward, it's leeward.
I heard it? Yep. Blue is leeward, because look where the wind is coming from. Okay, number 5. White or purple?
Purple.
Purple has right of way.
No white,
White. Why does white have right of way?
because purple's overtaking.
Pearls doesn't
Yep.
have maneuverability though.
Head
Tacking, that's it. Right, so
Okay.
while tacking, whether you go from port to starboard or starboard to port, once you've gone past the wind, you have to keep clear of everybody.
So Molly, one quick question. Overtaking is a rule for normal sailing, right?
Well, we're going to get there in just a minute.
Okay.
You've seen the slides. Number 6. Number 6, who has right of way? Yellow or pink? Annie, why does yellow have it?
You know,
They're being, it looks like they're being overtaken, but maybe that's not the reason why. But
So the actual rule is boats on the same tack, but they're not overlapped. Then the clear ahead boat has right of way over the clear astern boat. But let's look at number 7.
what does clear ahead mean?
Clear ahead means there's no overlap, so yellow is ahead of pink. That's a great question, Anna.
Thank you.
So blue is clear ahead of orange, but the rules, there's a hierarchy. So which boat
Starboard tack.
is what color? Yeah. Okay, this is a situation Jamie was about to ask about. Who has right of way, orange or blue?
Orange has right of way because it's on the starboard tack.
Yes, this is a very strange situation, and this only applies in racing. So orange has right of way over blue because orange is on a starboard tack and blue is on a port tack. Okay, I have called this in races. What should blue do? Blue has gotten out of my way, which is an appropriate response, but what could blue do?
Tack.
Okay, they're going downwind. look where the wind is,
Jive.
Move their
jive. If they throw the boom to the other side, now we're at number 6 again. So if I'm behind you yelling starboard, just move your leg over, don't get on.
So the other suggestion I
Yeah.
have, Molly, is, so a lot of us learned overtaking as a rule in 101, right? There's essentially no overtaking rule in racing.
In racing. In cold regs, there is. So if you're out there and you're not racing, the boat coming from behind is always the giveaway boat. They have to go out and around. And I've had tankers go out and around my catamaran because they have to.
What are the call outs? So you said you would, if you hear me calling starboard, what are the things that people call out?
Hailing, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. So if I am hailing starboard, it's not required, but I'm just alerting you that I think I have right of way because I'm starboard. So if somebody's yelling leeward to you,
They
they're
think
pointing
they
out
have
that
right of
they think, yes, they believe they have right of way, and so they are letting you know that they think they have right of way.
Is that necessary?
There are only 2 times a hail is required, which we'll get into. No, we are not doing rule 20. It's not required. You out there racing are expected to know that that boat is on starboard and you are on port, or that boat is leeward and you are not. So the hail is actually not. But what we're going to really try to advocate for is a proactive form of communication. It will minimize collisions.
Yeah.
It will help us out. If not, we don't want it to be reactive yelling at each other.
Right.
Just, especially coming into a mark, you're like, hey, I have overlap and I'm the
Just heads
inside
up.
boat. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Question?
So, yeah?
Maybe unrelated question on
No,
that.
that's it.
When you've got multiple classes starting, what is the size of the starting box that you have to keep clear of?
That would actually have to be specified in
That's in
sailing
the
instructions.
Okay.
If you want, generally, if it's not your start, you stay out of the box.
Well, sure. No, the reason I ask is that, like, last weekend, we were out, and we were, like, way the hell away from the line, and it was the ORC start, and there was this guy that was, like, and we were, like, also 4.5 minutes. Like, we were, like, before the warning.
Okay.
And the guy was yelling at us, like, we're in sequence. And it's like, no, we're, like, way the hell away. And so I just didn't know if there was some larger
No, there's
area.
not. You know,
Alright.
you do your best to not mess with boats that
I
are
mean, sure.
in sequence,
Sure.
but there's actually no rule that you can't go run the line or like go ahead to win.
Okay.
I mean,
There
there
was
is
in
a
this
rule that
case.
says that you should try to keep clear of them,
Right.
but
Fair sailing, yeah.
there's also some people that are very aggro.
Yeah, I just, yeah, I
And
didn't
that's,
know.
I mean, that's happened to me on Wednesday nights, that I've been on the wrong, you know, our starts, 10 minutes after the first one, right? So then,
Right.
you're doing your homework, trying to get your tax and which side of the line's favored, and you're right, all right, well, the other side of the line's favored, you gotta get across. Just, there's no, and you yell at it once in a while.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Unlikely to happen on a Monday night or a Sunday night here.
Well, yeah.
But yes, on Wednesday
So
night.
there, for the R race, there was special instruction that indicated you can't be in or above or behind, you can't go back or forth across the line until you're, so there was instructions that,
So they had a restricted start.
yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, we were all the way over by the sea.
Oh, okay, okay.
I mean, if you're not between the boat and the pin, you're completely fine.
Okay, okay.
It's just, if you realize that, like, 6 minutes, right, so you're inside their sequence, if you're on the wrong side of the line, that's a tough spot to be in. So you either go down and around, or way up and above, so they don't perceive that you're bothering them.
Gotcha.
Okay, so there is the summary. The one we want to take a look at a little bit closer is the tacking rule. So you're on a port tack, all the way to head to wind, you are still on a port tack. As soon as you go slightly past head to wind, you are now starboard, but your rights do not start until you get all the way to the close haul on the other side. So for those of you here for Ian and John's lecture, we looked at the tartan crash. The white tartan actually gets to their starboard close haul point of sail, but they do it about 4 inches off of the green tartan's bow, or stern. And so even though they were there, the foul still would have gone to white, because even when you get there, you instantly have right of way, but you still have to allow other boats an opportunity to get out of your way.
Well, what about that previous situation where one boat's behind the other, you said all you do is swing your boom over and now you're on a starboard tack?
So that's a jut, not a tack.
Not that.
Right, so this only applies while tacking, which is when your bow goes through head to wind.
Okay.
But in that other
Jiving,
previous
you can toss it back
situation,
and
so as
forth.
soon as you jibe, you would have rights, if you jibed at a time where they didn't have a chance to get away from you, because this is St.
Yeah.
Thomas 2 years
You
ago.
gotta give them time.
Yeah, so
So-
we had a boat we were right next to, they threw their boom over to suddenly get lured rights back, and then they immediately hit us, right? And so that's the,
Yeah, it was in St. Thomas. He was mad because I was shoving him off course, which I had rights to do. Okay, so then there are also 4 rules to restrict the right-of-way vote. So 4 rules to establish who has right-of-way, and then 4 that restrict it. Right-of-way doesn't mean you
Can
can
we
do
go
anything
back
you
a
want.
little bit?
Maybe.
So, what you're saying is that you have to get to close haul before you actually establish the rights, if you're on leeward, right?
Yep.
So,
If you have tacked into the position,
yeah.
you now have right-of-way, but you don't have right-of-way until you're in your close haul.
So the question I'm having is that, you know, when you're on the line and people are really just head to win the whole time, right? They've not established one way or the other. They came in on starboard, they're head to win.
That means they're starboard.
That's okay.
Right, so if you come in on starboard and you head to win, you're on starboard until you passed head to win. Now, that's a little, like, subjective, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
when exactly you're past that.
which is the thing we want to make sure we don't do, right? So if we
Yeah.
luff up,
Yeah.
which rainbows we don't want to luff up just because they accelerate like a tank.
Yeah.
So when you get right of way, you still have to allow the other boat to maneuver. Everybody has to avoid collisions. That's rule 14, that's our favorite rule. Even if you are right, if you can avoid the collision, just do it, and then we'll talk about it later. Okay, so we are gonna,
Yeah,
sorry.
Molly's new, I call this the Brenda rule, right? Not get Brenda mad at us. Molly's favorite thing now this is that collisions are slow, right? Because if you
Collisions
fail-
slow you down.
Yeah, because even if you're in the right and you don't have to do a penalty turn, you still end up worse off than if you just avoided, plus Brenda.
Okay, so there are, there's a niche now, a lot of people have been coming to the school and learning how to sail, and then racing on Mondays and learning how to race, and breaking into new crews on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, weekends. So, although Rule 17, we probably will not enforce very much because it doesn't happen that much here. If you go and race other places, you need to know that there is this Rule 17. So this is the proper course rule. So that's sort of a summary of what it says, but we're gonna illustrate it. So this yellow boat is clear astern, so it's behind the white boat. It's within 2 boat lengths of width. So that's what it means by that. Not 2 lengths this way, 2 lengths width-wise. Regardless of where the wind is coming from, let's say this yellow boat is just faster, so it's gonna sail into this space. As soon as it sails into that space, it is the right-of-way boat. But it's restricted by this Rule 17 if this is how the leeward overlap was established. If you tack or jibe into it, all bets are off. But if this is what happens, then the rule says you can't sail above your proper course.
So you can't cut them off, basically.
You can't lump them up
Yeah.
if this is your proper, if blue is your proper course. So that seems like a pretty simple rule.
Yeah, you can't just veer into
This one
them.
time took us for a long ride, well above,
Until you hit the
they're
mark.
like, it's on a proper course.
So, and that's why it's complicated. Proper course is very subjective. So if I'm the yellow boat and I decide that I see better wind over there, maybe that's where I want to go. If I think there's less current over there, there are ways that I could justify that maybe that would be my proper course, because if you weren't there, I would do that, because I think that the wind or the waves or the currents are better.
So that's something where you
Intention.
would fly a penalty flag and like it would get dealt with after the race, not like in the moment.
This is a very hard protest to win, but somebody might win it on Sunday. So, all right, so then it doesn't apply before the start. There's no proper course before the start. As soon as that last whistle goes off, though, it does. And so you have to sort of remember how the overlap came to be. Your proper course at the start is close haul, unless you're at the pin. And then your proper course could be above close haul because your proper course is to make that pin. So you would be able to shoot it or pinch to make it because that is proper course. So it only applies at one end, not the other.
Well, speaking of which, there's a situation like this, where we were approaching the start line, and the leeward boat was yelling leeward, and by giving to them, we risked going over early.
That's on you.
Yeah,
Leeward boat has the right to push you over that start.
okay.
Now, it doesn't mean it's a good idea for them to do it, but they have the rights to do it. You can't be like, oh, I can't move because I'll be over.
Yeah, if this was the start, we'll talk
I
about
did
this.
say that, and they smiled at me.
Yeah. We'll get to this towards the end of the start sequence, but if this was a start and not a windward mark rounding, since there's no proper course before the start, that leeward boat does have rights to push that outside boat up, and we call that that's the outside boat is what we call barging. So keep in mind, because we're going to talk about there's a big fleet tendency in our fleet to come in on starboard on the boat end, and a lot of people are coming in high because it's a great, easy way to come in, but it's also a way that you can easily get pushed out. So keep in mind when we get to that.
Okay. And we can go back to 17 because there's a lot of nuances on 17, but for the most part on Monday and Sundays, it doesn't really apply here. It doesn't happen all that often. All right, this one's yours.
You want me to do this one? So, we love joking about the rules, right? You know, we will joke about rule 42.1,
Yeah.
48.1.
48.1, which
You
is,
gotta, okay.
go ahead.
You gotta finish the race with all the people you started with. Actually, the same number. It doesn't have to be the same people. It actually just has to be the same number.
Or like rule 22, you should try to avoid a capsized boat, right? So there's tons of rules that we'll joke about, right? And I think sometimes the rules get frustrating to us. But I think that there are 3 really good reasons that we should all be striving to honor these rules. The first is the Brenda rule, right? Because it avoids collisions, because it creates predictability, right? And it especially gets important around things like mark roundings when, you know, rule 18 gets really complicated, who has rights of way. But that's where learning that rule so that we avoid collisions around mark roundings, right? The second reason is this, I think most of us are doing sailing because or racing on Monday nights or Sunday nights because we get better at doing it. And that predictability of knowing where people are going to be and learning what you should be doing to sail as fast as you can, as good as you can, depends on everyone else following the rules. And it also that keeps it fun instead of being frustrating, right? I think sometimes we see the rules as frustrating and getting in the way of that. But I think if we can shape our thinking that our self-enforcement of the rules, which is, you know, part of the sailing ethic, is the way that allows us to avoid the collisions, have fun, and become better sailors, it makes it a lot easier to think through them. You know, one thing that we've started to do in the last year is penalty turns, you know, for KVC nights when you foul someone. And I think it's a great way to encourage yourself to like work on getting better at the rules and thinking about it. Is just do the honorable thing of if you foul someone, clear yourself of it by doing a single penalty turn. Knowing that if we're racing on Wednesday nights and you foul someone, it's usually 2 penalty turns. But for here, it's always, you know, a single penalty turn, right? And so, you know, how dizzy you get doing your penalty turn depends on how good the wind is.
Oh, but it's not cumulative. So if you foul a boat and hit a mark, you only have to do, in the real world, you only do 2. You don't have to do 3. If you foul 2 boats, you know, it's not like you have to keep.
So,
All right. So that's sort of a recap of what John and Ian spent a lot of time on with some great videos. Any questions on the basic rules?
Are boat lengths always measured in length width-wise? Did I say that correctly? Instead of imagining, whenever we talk about a length that is 2 boats, it's never 2 boats like this, it's always 2 boats like this.
That's the same thing.
Well, no, I mean, it's instead of being, and so I'm going in this direction, it's not 2 this way, it's always 2 this way.
That's just for Rule 17. It's 2
Oh.
width.
Okay,
So you can't come from here and call Rule 17. You have to come from clear astern to call Rule 17.
is that the only time that that the 2 boat length is?
Yes. Rule 17 is the only one that invokes that.
Okay.
The boat is a beam.
I think there is a boat length, if you're going into a rounding mark.
mark roundings is 3 boats. Yeah, the zone around.
Oh, the zone,
mark.
yeah, but that's not
Okay,
width,
I just wanted
right.
to-
But then it's 3 like this,
Right.
right?
Yes.
3 kind of, okay.
But those are always down.
It's a length.
That's what I thought, and then,
It's always
Just in
that slide was like, oh, okay, so maybe I was misunderstanding.
No, it's just for 17.
And then
Okay,
is
thank
boat
you.
length your boat length or key opponent's?
Yeah, it's your boat length. So in mixed fleet racing, the zone around a mark is different sizes for different boats,
Okay.
adding to the complexity. But Monday and Sunday nights, we don't have to deal with that.
Sure.
Okay, so then start of this presentation is a little more, we wanted to go over, back to the basics, make sure everybody has a good foundation in case we had any new racers. So on Monday and Sunday nights, the things that stay the same, we do race one design. So it's not mixed fleet racing. Everybody is in a rainbow, unless Jonah goes out there and screws with us, but we're gonna discourage that, aren't we? All right, so everybody's in a rainbow. We race 2 to 4 person crews. Every time when you're gonna go out there, you're gonna see a starting line. For us, it's 2 red buoys. At some point, Ian will come up and tie up to one of them. He always picks the same one. So that is the boat end, because looking upwind, it's the right-hand side. The other one by definition is called the pin end. We almost always start with an upwind beat. That is not the case on Wednesday nights. Thursday, like if you go somewhere else, they can have a downwind or a crosswind start. But we almost always start with an upwind start. We almost always keep marks to port. So that means it's gotta come down the port side of your boat.
Molly,
Yes.
in this diagram, one beat has 3 actions. So the beat is really from one place to the next, not how many actions you take to get there.
Correct. The beat is sailing upwind.
Okay.
And because generally when you're on close haul, you're banging into the, you're getting beat. That's actually where it comes from.
Is that true, or is that just?
Yeah, no, that's true. I didn't
Is
make
it
that
really?
up.
Oh, okay.
I made other stuff. No, because you know when you turn downwind and everything's like slower and calm and all, right? And then you turn back upwind and it's like
Mhm.
the boat is banging. That is actually where the term
Okay.
beat comes from. Okay, things that change. We rotate through boats, we rotate through crews and positions, and then we have different courses. Things that don't change would be the zone, right? So that's the 3 boat length. We are gonna not do marker and rules today in the interest of time. Our next presentation will focus on marker and rules because that's where a lot of our collisions are happening. We use a 3-minute whistle sequence. Other races use different sequences. So if you go to a race somewhere else, it might be a 5-minute, might be a rolling 2, but we do 5. We're gonna cover this pretty much before every start on a Sunday or Monday, so you don't have to write this down or memorize any of this. The key part being here in blue, what you wanna hear after the start whistle is all clear. That means no boats were over early. If you hear your name or your boat's name, you were over early and you need to circle back. You have to get that back, your whole boat below the starting line and coming back up. And when you do that, you have no rights, no matter what tack you're on. If you're restarting and all those other boats are not, you gotta avoid everybody. Every once in a while, we have so many boats over that Ian can't identify the ones in the middle or on the far side, and then you'll just hear a whole bunch of whistles, and then everybody come back, we're gonna try again.
I'm sorry, can you go back one?
Yep.
Are we using those pennants?
Yes.
We have been using those pennants. They're really small and you can't see them, but they're tiny.
Okay.
But yes, we're using the pennants.
What's the Y flag?
Your PFD is required. It's a Yankee flag, right? So that's the flag. It means you have to wear a PFD.
Okay.
I thought we actually always had to wear PFDs, but apparently
I was confused by the
It's a PDF.
typo.
PDF. Oh, sorry.
Like we.
That was intentional, we're just testing.
Right, we're looking to see. You win a prize.
All right.
You win this one. It's not even one. Okay,
I'm so sorry, can you stop again?
sure.
Ian, where do you display the flags? In the front?
The race
Are you
committee.
holding them, are you inside?
Yeah, it's usually the certain order.
Okay.
Because I want to put it on, you need to find a place to put it.
Like the.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
You sure you're looking truthful?
Sometimes it's get like,
Can't find them.
yeah, if like, I left them on the boat the week before, and then Kidship used them during the week, and then they disappeared.
Uh-huh.
So
Always blame.
usually the go-to in 90% of all races, the go-to is the flags. In our races, the go-to is my whistle.
Okay.
Takes precedence. So if you hear the gather, we're getting ready. You hear 3 long blasts, it's 3 minutes. But I try to do the flags, but sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Okay.
I think the flags are really helpful when it's really windy and it's hard for us to hear and we're moving further, faster before the start than the flags. Because there have been races where we're like, well, we totally couldn't hear any of the whistles, you know?
That's where it's important for you to have your own watch.
You miss here, sometimes you only hear 2 or
Which
3.
we will
Yeah,
cover.
if you guys want me to start doing that,
Radio.
DHF,
Yeah.
That means we all have to have radios then. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. I mean, the whistles, you'll still do the whistle and
Yes.
the call, right? So,
But if there's a segment of the club that wants to bring their VHF on board, I'm happy to start doing that.
Yeah. More communication.
Okay, we do a lot of windward, leeward, buoy racing, especially when we are either losing daylight or we have lighter winds. And we just wanted to cover the basic structure. So if you hear that we're doing windward, leeward, buoy racings, you don't need to see the chart. You don't need to know. You look out and you're going to see a diamond. You see these four. The middle two are the start and the finish. You look upwind for your windward mark and downwind for your leeward mark. So it's always going to be this diamond shape. It's just going to be out there. Sometimes it's a bigger diamond, sometimes it's a little diamond. But that is generally what happens when we are doing windward, leeward, buoy racing.
We also use bigger marks for the windward and leeward marks as opposed to the start line marks.
We usually do that this past season because we now have these giant orange drop marks,
Yeah.
which are fantastic. But it's not a guarantee. Like back in the day, we used to use the little ones. Okay, so we're going to do that upwind beat first. You're going to sail dead downwind generally. You go around the leeward mark and you finish. And that's one race. We do anywhere between 2 and 5, depending on wind speed and light. This year, there might be a little bit of a twist. So especially early in the season when we're all a little bit rusty, or if it's particularly windy, Ian might choose to set either an offset mark, which is the first one, pick something out there that you'd also have to go around, which would be more of a triangle, or just tell you have to honor the pin end of the line. Typically you do not. But what that does is it allows us to practice a different point of sail. You'd be on a broad reach instead of a dead run. And it also creates a little bit more separation between some of the upwind boats and the downwind boats. So again, it's an attempt to minimize collisions.
When you say honor, you just mean don't go over the start line, go outside of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you have to go around that pin. That would be the easiest way to do it, just because you don't have to set another mark. But okay, and then we do distance races. Ian will pick government marks, the bridge, the lighthouse. I've never actually made it to the lighthouse. Have you? Yeah. We've tried a couple times to get to the lighthouse and back, and someday we will.
Which lighthouse, Thomas Point?
Thomas Point.
It's really an opportunity to use the checkered flag.
Yeah. And then
I mean, well, the problem
I'm
is,
here over here.
it's a lot.
the problem is the most consistent breeze we get in the summer is a southerly, which means Thomas Point is usually
a beat. You'd have to beat to it.
Beat to it.
Yeah.
beat to it.
Yeah.
And then Ian decides every once in a while that we're going to just do something crazy. So we have other things. Sometimes we reef and unreef during the race. Multiple laps, wait at the beginner. Yeah, so team racing I think would be a ton of fun, but that has not been approved yet.
What is that? What's team racing?
Where it's like the cumulative result of boats on boats. And so then,
Will you explain
Then
these
there's
before you
defe-
move on?
what's that?
Can you explain these before you move on? Windward beat?
No, because like this is unusual, and when we get here that night, Ian will spend a long time on the chart showing you exactly what you need to do.
Okay.
Because we got other really cool stuff that you're gonna want to see. All right, any questions on the race except for Bella? Any questions on the race? All right. Oh.
So actually, this is Molly's favorite thing that she's been collecting, right? So last year she made you all come down with how many different ways that you can come up with.
Right, but not everybody might have been here. So fall off. What are other terms that mean fall off?
Bear up.
Bear off, bow down,
Bear away.
bear away,
Foot off, I read.
foot off, right?
Foot off.
Foot off.
I mean, depending on the experience of the helmsman, go left.
Yeah, no,
Actually,
Literally.
the Academy
that way.
said
Yeah.
that
so-
use left and right.
I think you like lean
So we found over 30.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness. Lean on.
Lean on it.
Oh, I've heard that one.
That's my
You're
favorite.
like.
That is Jamie's favorite. If you race with Jamie and he tells you to lean on it, you're supposed to know that.
I'm gonna do that.
Sail fat.
Hold on, you're
Apparently-
I've heard fat
Apparently,
too.
still fat and tickler are up are not things that I'm.
So we had a Canadian race coach in St. Thomas, and he would say, "Your tickler's up," and I'm like, "Oh, whoa, whoa!" They call the telltales ticklers.
Ticklers.
If that's on so if your tickler is up, your telltale is up. You're pinching. You don't want you to fall down. I know it was a little awkward, but he's a great guy. We are so good friends.
So
I'll take
Yeah,
that.
right.
Oh, getting greedy. See, we have another one we're gonna add.
Getting greedy.
a good bit of advice though, since we rotate crew is to make sure that you've talked ahead of time. Or more importantly, also just encourage enough communication in the boat that when I say press on it instead of lean on it, you're like, what in the world are you talking about, right? Because we had a number of situations that we joked about last year where people would get off and they'd get in here to have a drink and they'd be like, the entire day he was saying lean on it. I have no idea what he meant, right? Which probably was not beneficial, so.
So that's our tip for that one, to just simplify and be
Yeah.
consistent.
And the other part, I think often we get stressed, and this goes back to the rule stuff, and we yell leeward or starboard or things. And to me, you know, that's when the also reinforces the rules as being the frustrating thing. I think we need to keep working on changing our mindset that that type of stuff is hailing. It's just communication, right? It is. We'll talk about mark room last time. We talked about mark room like as you're getting close to that 3 boat lengths, looking to the boat behind you to say, you've got overlap. I know you have overlap. I'm going to give you room as you go around, or you don't have overlap, so that it's a communication thing. And I think we'll hear an example of this in a little bit later, or someone who I don't think is here tonight does a really nice job of saying starboard in a way that's just sort of a communicative way. Unfortunately, there's still the tap that happens afterwards. But that's, I think, our big part of this for us is to not get stressed, but to just use this as talking to each other.
So if you are the most important person, if you're the most experienced person, if you're the most experienced person in your boat, it really is on you to communicate with the other 2 members of your crew. And keep in mind that somebody might have finished 101 earlier that week or the week before. And so it's on you to make sure the communication within your boat is good, and then communication between boats is still a positive experience for that person.
When I hail starboard, I yell it really loud because I need to be heard.
Yeah.
They can't see. Now, we're putting windows on the bridge this year, I think.
That's been alluded to, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be nice, but I yell it super loud. I mean, I use my cheerleader voice, you know what I mean? And that way I can make sure that they can't necessarily see me.
And sometimes that boat, like they're dealing with an override, or they're like everybody's head is in the boat and they legitimately do not see you. So letting them know that you're here, you're there, and you're on starboard is a good thing.
And I still think you can yell really loud and it still be a friendly yell.
Yeah, it's a
Right,
friendly
like Carrie doesn't yell at, well, maybe me, but, right, I think it's a matter of how we approach it and think about it, but yeah.
It's like you're yelling to them, not at them.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
a
kind
great
of like honking in a car. There's a polite way to do it, there's a not polite way to do it. And it takes some time to understand that and form that.
No, that's a great analogy, Rhonda.
Don't lean on it.
Yeah, if you lean on it.
So the other thing that we wanted to spend a big chunk of today on then was talking about, what was your time?
One, yeah.
Was talking about starting. And we're going to focus a lot of this on starting, and then we're going to move into clean air at the end, which also applies to a lot of the rest of our sailing. But there are days that I think we do an amazing job where, right at the starts line, we've got most of the boats all within a boat length of each other. But the reality is there's also a lot of days where that's not the case. And I think that there's a lot of space for us to make up. This is one of probably the 2 or 3 biggest places where races are getting decided, especially in our short course races. So we wanted to start with a question of, just to get a discussion going. It's 15 seconds before the race. Who do you want to be? Or Molly would ask.
Well, and there's at least 4 boats up there that I would be happy to be.
Yeah.
None of them are red.
Where's the mark?
First choice, I think my first choice would be
There's the wind.
dark green would be my first.
Next mark is up there.
Dark green's my second choice.
White.
I
take
first
pink.
green.
Marigold.
I think the turquoise is in a good position, but I get very confused about that when I'm out there. So if you could, if the answer could be turquoise.
If yellow can pull off that, it's
You're assuming that people are lured in here.
So
They're all lured.
I would not choose turquoise.
I think dark green.
Okay.
let's do this real quickly this way.
Anybody want to be white? Sure. I would love to be white. What is white attempting to do? Protect the fleet, right? So white has to get out across. Only 15 seconds. If this is what the boats look like, you got a decent shot at it. we sort of want to discourage port tacking of the fleet because it is, the conditions have to be perfect. You can't just decide tonight on port tacking the fleet.
So, and I will suggest that knowing where the wind is in this, you're not port tacking the fleet, because you're about to sail head to
Okay,
wind.
what do
But-
you mean by port tacking the fleet?
So, we're gonna talk about, one of the things we're gonna talk about is that almost always, you wanna be approaching the start line on starboard, because you have rights. And if you're approaching the line on port, and all the rest of the boats are approaching on starboard, you have no rights over anyone. So the only way you're gonna beat them is if you're faster than them to get across everyone. And that rarely happens. It's not gonna happen when the wind is shifted this way, and we can talk about that a little bit today and a little bit next time. But the other possibility for white is that maybe white's coming in fast, and it's gonna turn at the pen end.
Yeah.
So it's possible that white's not a bad boat to beat, but I'm good with like only 2 people saying yes to white. Who wants to be pink?
Who said pink? I heard pink. Okay, why pink?
Good.
What?
You're traveling at full speed with a starboard tack to the line, and you're most likely to have clean air.
Perfect. And that's what being alone, right? So, do the rainbows respond well to luffing at the line and then accelerating quickly? If you have dinghy experience, rainbows will make you cry because you can't do what you can do in a dinghy.
But that guy that luffed, he's probably gonna go onto a port tack, right?
Yeah, so if this
Actually, the
person's
entire
luffing,
fleet's about to roll him.
yeah, and you will see we'll get dinghy sailors that'll come out with us, and they've just learned that this is the thing you're supposed to do. And they'll, and then like 5 minutes later, everyone else is here and they're here.
That's what I'm trying to get at right.
Okay, so, but with the way you've got the wind direction, the boat end is like heavily favored, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But we'll talk about
Yeah.
that. So you're gonna suggest maybe that you wanna be one of these boats?
Yeah, or the yellow boat trying to pull off a dip start.
Yeah, so the yellow boat is one of my 4 boats because, especially with this situation, we do allow dip starting. Other races do not. If they restrict the start line, you can't cross the start line after the sequence is started. We don't restrict the start line, so yellow, all you have to do is get down and back, and you're in really good shape.
How past, so by dip starting, you mean you dip in?
You have to get the whole boat underneath.
Like, how deep is the dip? A full,
Eh,
a plunge.
The whole boat has to be underneath the line.
It's like the hokey pokey.
Yeah.
You can't just have one foot in and one foot out. You gotta have the whole body out and then the whole body out.
So dark green, light green,
You start to take yourself because nobody else does that, right? You can't really dip start in the real world, can you?
You can, there are places you can dip start. Actually, Carrie is one of the best dip starters I have ever seen. Carrie perfected the dip start and crushed the fleet year after year after year.
Christine?
I kinda like movement.
Because the rainbows, as you mentioned, are not the most nimble I've ever seen. Is it wind dependent, current dependent?
So in this case, we're all in rainbows, so none of them are nimble. But you have to be able to get down and back. If any of these boats were doing well and were coming at you at full speed, the dip start's a little risky because you don't have that real estate to get down, and all those other boats are coming at you.
But,
Nice hole there.
So guys, what
just touch the mouse,
what would be, think about what could be a situation on the race course that would make yellow boat start the best start?
And Christine, you actually said something that is gonna be part of that answer. You said it could depend on,
The wind and the current.
The current, right? If this
So
is a strong,
if the current is coming from the top of the screen, right, that's gonna inhibit all those other boats getting to the line. And it'll help yellow.
they're gonna ride it down and then dip. Ed Reel is actually particularly good at this, and we have some video of him killing it.
So
on
you
it.
have a night with the adverse current, this could be your best start.
Yeah.
Please all don't try it on the same night.
no, it's better if we all do it at the same time, it's worse, no. Okay, to keep this moving forward, 3 boats at the bottom, which of those 3 boats do you want to be?
Dark green.
Why dark green?
Because they're lured, so they have rights over orange, and they're ahead of light green. And they look like they're not gonna hit, orange is questionable as to whether or not it's gonna hit Ian.
Yep. And so this is going to be a reminder, we're going to keep coming back and forth to barging, because this is the typical approach from our fleet. this boat does not get to force its way in here if this boat is going tightly. And we'll talk about the point at which it might happen, right? So you will probably best be dark green. These two boats could be coming in fast, but these are the two boats that are potentially in a barging situation. But this is really typically the approach of our fleet, okay?
So don't be kind, like, don't let them in.
Did Gary even say that?
Take the Asian boys and tell them that you are Leeward boat
Yes.
and you're not letting them in. Give them
Yes.
time to get out of the way.
Although, like, you get into a lot of cases there where you have to
Don't let
avoid
them
them.
barge in.
Yes.
Yeah,
But that would be a
but-
foul,
I
and then you
see
protest.
all the time where you guys let that boat barge on in.
We're gonna watch some
When
videos.
you say barge, as a verb,
So in barging, if they get there after, before, it's in barging.
So barging actually isn't in the rule book, but what it is it's breaking rule 11, because you are the windward boat, you don't have right of way. So the leeward boat, windward boat can't just sail into that space because they want to.
And if the leeward boat has to veer off, even if you're getting there faster, then it's a foul.
But if you establish space before, you're on the proper course, so then.
No proper course before
Not
start.
before the start.
So we're gonna keep coming back to that.
Okay, so now we got a beautiful sequence of videos that Jamie has put together.
Maybe.
Or we'll do shadow puppets.
They should have done right, so.
This is when it can get embarrassing.
No, because you're too far away, we can't really tell who's in what boat.
So sometimes we do a really good job. Other times,
That was
So-
probably me.
Oh, that's the start?
or not knowing where the ley lines are.
Oops.
I remember that day.
What's going on now?
Or we're going to talk about how much dirty air is back in here and why those boats end up going a lot slower.
Yellow's like
There's a reason to have it that
They're not for sale, they're not well, that's probably me.
We're going to talk a lot about knowing how fast you're going to go in timing, because we end up seeing that happen a lot. Boats doing a really good fast start, but coming in late.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, the baby ducklings.
These videos are priceless.
Oh. Brenda.
Bunker boats.
Right, all those boats have started. And this one's like,
But it's not just this one.
this is one of our favorite videos. So that's Ed Brielle, and he did a nice job.
But was he below the line?
He did, he got down.
He went right along and then pulled off.
So sometimes we do nail it. Sometimes we nail other things.
Oops.
Right, that is a port boat hitting a stern.
Not now.
But Ian tells us all
That's
the
a,
time
that's
on
a
light
better
wind.
attitude to have than the other one.
He's just like, that's funny. But in light wind, Ian tells everybody before at the top dock to stay close. And when he says stay close, he's talking like boat length within the line, not 5 minutes away.
So I'm going to stay here for a second because of the videos. But remember, we're going to talk through a whole bunch of tools to help try and improve our starts to overcome a number of those things. But the really simple thing you're trying to do is to be at the line, at that final whistle, sailing at full speed, which in a rainbow means you've been speeding up for probably 10, 15 seconds, even in regular moderate air. Usually that means you're in close haul or maybe falling off slightly from close haul. And you're going to want to lane in clean air, which is what we're going to talk about later. And ultimately, in the next discussion, we'll talk about what the race plan will be for after the start and things that will become important to that. So that's the goal.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, do you calculate the length of the starting line
Oh,
depending on how
just
many?
so.
Yep, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay, I forgive you, you haven't seen the slides. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so you,
She's
you're
asking
gonna
what,
have a wider starting line when there are more boats racing.
Usually.
yes, you should.
Wait, except for when someone sets the line before they.
There's a formula, but.
There is a
Yeah.
formula.
Okay,
But yeah, and we'll talk actually about thinking about how long the start line is.
okay.
So again, just really quickly, the goal is to be at the start. And so sometimes we actually do this pretty well.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Did you all intentionally blur the video?
I asked that question. No, it's hard to be on the race committee boat and filming and like all that.
Lap bands over the eyes.
Protect the innocent.
That video would be hard.
Yeah. So now the next set of things is the simple goal, right, is to be at the line at time with speed. So we want to talk through a bunch of tools that will help you do that. But I suspect that, we have a shared wisdom here of a whole bunch of different ways that people do that. So what are you all thinking about 5 minutes before the start?
Honestly?
Yes.
Please don't hit anybody, please don't hit anybody, please don't hit anybody.
Rule 14. Most important rule, rule 14.
So what are some of the things that you do in that 5 minutes before your starts?
Wind and current.
Okay, figure out wind and current.
How do you
figure out
do
the
that, Ron?
conditions.
I'm the favorite end.
Oh, I forgot what word, but, okay, favorite end.
So, like,
Favorite,
usually,
end of the line.
like,
Yeah.
I try to sail the line, so I can see which, end is gonna be more favored, or I perceive to be favored.
Okay.
And checking for current, how much I'm drifting off the line as I'm sailing, because then it gives me an indication what the current's doing.
Yep, so wind and current conditions.
What's your criteria for determining if it's,
Well, if you have the line, right, you're sailing the line, you can tell by the mark, you're using those two indicators to tell how much your drift is. So you know that there's a current, and then it kind of gives you an idea of what you're gonna have to contend with from the start.
And
That makes sense.
if you are halfway at the line and you head instead of the wind, where does your bow point? Does it point toward Minico or to the pin?
okay,
And
Yep.
that's the favorite end of your bow.
okay.
But also running the line to get you an idea of what speed you're gonna be able to get in that wind, so you know how far you can be away instead of the time to get back.
Time
Yeah,
line?
Mimic carry, I always try to
That's what Herb
shoot
said.
it a couple times to see what my speed is. So, naturally do it, and then, either the pin in or the start in,
Okay.
just to see carry pop.
Other things that people do.
Stay reasonably close.
Yep, that's a good one, yep. Depending on the
Yeah.
conditions, yep.
Annie has something?
Oh, I was saying, I usually reset my watch. I don't know if that's supposed to be on your list.
That's very.
We're gonna guess it's going to be.
That's really cool that you think to do that. It would not occur.
But
to me.
also
Yeah,
that's
you time
another
the
thing to do is time your runs, to
Mhm.
see how much time it's taking, so you know how far not to be away from the start.
Okay, so we're gonna talk through some of these.
Sites.
So one of the first things I think, and these are in the order that I think are the most important to do, not necessarily the order in which you would have to do them, right? But if the only thing you had time to do as you're sailing is it's taking you a bunch of time to get off the dock, you've got people who've just taken 101 and you're re-explaining to them not to tie the reefing lines underneath the boom, and things like that, then the most important thing to do as you're getting out there is to figure out what the course is, right? There's a bunch of times that people have not known which side of the line the first mark is on, right? And that's how you end up in some of those situations where you totally miss the start. So, simplest thing to do is make sure you spot the course. And as part of that, on the way out, I tried to figure out what the conditions are, practice some basic maneuvers with the crew, figure out what our communication is going to be, how we're going to say to tack and jibe. The second most important thing to me is to time the line. And so people suggest to time the line for a couple reasons. John, you said one was when you do it on the line, what does that give you?
Well, I I go down the line just to see, you know, favorite in the drift. But then what I'll do is actually, and Terry taught me this technique, is shoot the line, time that, how long it took me from that point to get to the line, so that I know, you know, to give it a judge. You can always have a wind shift and stuff. It gives you kind of a good judge of how far away to be if you're gonna make the line.
Okay,
Out
so,
of the water, it's hard to get a good reference for distance, so the length of the line takes 15 seconds, you've got something you can compare while you're out there.
yeah, so to me, and John's got some of the more advanced things we'll mention on timing the line, but the most important thing to me for timing the line is it lets me know how far I'm going to travel as long as the winds stay at that speed, which lets me know how far I can go away from the line, how deep I can go, you know, if it's a shallow wind night where I want to stay really close, if I'm doing an approach that's either from the pin or the boat end, how far away I can go before I have to come back. The other part to that line is it's your error range. If I'm coming in and my plan is to hit the boat, but suddenly I'm early and I need to bear off, if I know the line's a minute long, I've got a minute of an error range. But if the line's only 30 seconds because it's a high wind night and for some reason Ian sent a short line, which he's done occasionally, you need to know that you don't have a whole lot of error range, so you might need to slow up in other ways.
Can you,
Go ahead.
are you saying that if the line is a minute across, then the same distance this way is a minute, but the wind's different?
Yeah, it's not exact. No, and actually John's talking about sort of an advanced thing where he decides his approach to the line.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be probably sailing close hull on the approach to the line, which if he times that as well, that's a slightly different distance.
Uh-huh.
But just to me, having a rough idea of what this distance is gives me a rough idea of how fast the boat is moving. And especially because most of our approaches don't involve going really deep, because deep can be dangerous. They involve going out to one side and then coming back. And so you will be on a reach. And so timing it gives you an idea of what that reach speed is. Timing in both directions is one of the ways to figure out the favorite end of the line. Because you'll see which side you are more close hull on. Right? If you're sailing at the same point of sail, going both ways, the line's probably not biased. But if you're sailing in one way where it's really hard to reach the line, and we'll show a video of this, then you're going to know that the line is skewed, which we'll talk about in a second.
A lot of people take a range on something on the shore, so if you can't see the pin or the whatever, you still have a rough idea where the line actually is.
Yeah,
So-
that's great. That's the line sight that we're talking about, Ron. So yes, that's a great thing to do.
Someone mentioned having a watch and resetting the watch. I would say that after having sailing gloves, the number one bit of advice is to have something with a watch on it, a stopwatch. You know, in an ideal world, it's a countdown type that allows you to do start timers. But for timing all of these things, that to me is the next best step.
I also want to say, at this time is when you sight your finish line, because when the sun is setting and you're looking for that little orange ball, it's like impossible sometimes. So I sight my finish line at one of the houses.
Suggestion that we picked up in St. Thomas this year, that Matt was talking about beforehand, is if you use, when you're going back and forth to get a feel for the line ahead of time, do it in a counterclockwise motion. When you're in starboard, be close to the line. When you're in port, be a little bit further from the line, because that helps protect you from, you know, when you're on port, you're not going to have any rights, right? So if you're coming back on port trying to time the line and there's other boats coming on at starboard, right, it messes up your return, but it also just becomes safer. So using a counterclockwise rotation, not everyone has to do it, but if you do it, it de-stresses you a little bit. What were you saying?
I was talking about taking a range of line sight. There you go, yeah.
So explain how you do it.
Oh, just as you're running down the line from the boat to the pin, take a range on something on the shore. I guess you could do the other way around, but take range on something on the shore. So if your vision's obscured, you get another boat in the way, which is often the case. You can't see the pin, or maybe you can't see the committee boat. Yeah, still have a good idea where the line is, so you're not going to be over early.
Yep. And
Or
so
too far away.
the classic way. So the problem is if you're approaching the line, it's really hard to look both ways to see where the line is, right? And we want to be hitting the line at time. So the classic way of doing it, and we're going to get to the advanced way in a second, is to go up next to the committee boat and to look down through what the flag is going to be on the committee boat, which is usually the red buoy that Ian's connected to, through the pin end, and find something on shore that you can look at. And that thinking to that is that helps you see how close you are to the line as you're approaching it. So if I'm here and I'm approaching, this is that imaginary line I saw extended as my line sight. And I know that that's when the pen lines up with that thing on shore that I saw, in this case that particular tree. As I'm looking, if my line is above that or to the right of it, depending on how you're looking at it, then I know that I'm below the line. As I approach, I'm going to slow myself down or speed myself up based on a judgment of how far I'm from the line. When it lines up again, I know that I'm on the line, right? The hitch is here, since we're not actually having a person in the bow sitting at the very point of the bow, I'm actually over the line when I do it exactly this way. So you want to be timing it so you're hitting just before that point at that final whistle. So getting a line sight is something that a lot of people recommend. If I'm now below that spot, or I'm looking to the left through the line, I know that I've gone over the line. Does that make sense to people? So remembering it's the bow that matters. There's an alternative approach that people use, which is instead of looking through the committee boat to the pin, you do it as you're going down the line. If you do it at 2 boat lengths away, you have this line now to look at, and that's something you can, as you're going back and forth down the line, you can get a good feel for. Here, I would know that I'm getting within 2 boat lengths, if I'm going right for the boat end. If I'm going for the middle, where I'm going to turn up to start, and I'm looking through that same site, I know I'm 1 boat length away, geometry. So that gives me a better way of catching a line sight.
Can you go back to the previous slide? What's confusing me is, or even the one before that, you said that if the mark that you made on land is below you, yeah, that one. If your mark on land is above the pin, you are over. How would it be, if you're looking at it, you're going to be above it, not your mark on land.
So,
mark on land is actually going to be below where you're looking.
Your mark is.
yeah, so there's 2 ways of thinking about it, and it just is in your head. If I'm in the boat and I'm sitting myself in the boat and I'm looking at, say that my line sight was looking from Stephen to Ian, right? If I'm up here and I'm now seeing the keg, then the keg is now to the left of Ian, or it's below where Ian was. So this
Ian
is
was
when,
your mark, not
yeah,
the keg.
yeah. So Ian's my line sight. So here, when I'm looking at Christine, Stefan, then I know I'm below the line. Here I'm above the line, but the keg is below that line. So some people talk about it as above or below. Other people just talk about it as right or left as you're looking through it. And it's just a matter of, does that make sense?
Do you want me to get the photograph?
Nope, I'll think about it.
Well, at the
I don't
end,
want to slow the group
yeah,
down.
how about at the end, we're going to come back to a picture
Okay,
of that?
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You want to do it at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. I took 2 pictures out of it.
Okay.
I'll show them.
Favorite end of the line. Who was suggesting we should do a favorite end of the line?
Somebody did. Yep.
Someone want to talk through why does it matter?
The ladder.
I mean, it matters because the side of the line that's closer to the wind is a shorter course to sail. Right? No matter where your windward mark is, like, it's going to be shorter.
So, if the line is square to the wind, which is what Ian tries to do, boats starting, and you don't have to be on opposite tacks for this to work, but boats starting on either end of the line are just going to hit each other at the same time. But if the line is skewed to the wind, a boat starting further upwind gets a big advantage. And if it's a long line with a substantial skew, which happens to us a lot when the wind shifts, you can be several boat lengths ahead just by starting on one side of the line or the other.
Okay, so this is going to be a silly question. How do you tell whether the line is skewed when you're out there?
You didn't see the big sign that says wind.
So,
There's a big arrow.
Yeah.
we're going to get there in just a second.
Okay.
I just want to say, if it's a left shift, we're going to talk about how we figure that out. The left side of the course of the pen is favored. If the right shift, the right side of the course is favored. The way you tell, the classic easiest way to tell, is you go head to wind on the line. And so by going head to wind, I go to someplace between the boat and the pen, and I turn the boat straight up so that my main sail, all my sails are luffing, and the boom is going straight down the middle of the boat. And I'm then going to look at where my bow is pointing. If my bow is pointing more towards the right side of the line, it's a right shift, because the wind is clocked to the right.
Yes, clock.
Clocked to the right. And that means that effectively, this side of the line is further upwind, right? So all you have to remember is head to wind. If I'm pointing to one end or the other, that's the end that's favored. If I'm pointing to the left or pointing to the pen, right, then that means the pen end's favored. If you can't tell, and this is one of the frustrations a lot of people do, they get out there, they try and get there, it doesn't look like one side's closer than the other. This is not an exact science, but I'll say that a really good rule for the rainbows is if you can't tell, it doesn't matter. Right?
Ian sets a very square line. He's
Yeah.
really good at setting a square line.
It really matters when you're going to go a shorter distance going up, right? So it's the effect of that wind shift on letting you turn up or pushing you down. Yeah. Questions? Molly?
I don't have any questions.
Oh, no. I just,
Our next is...
you want to?
All right, so this is our starting box, and the starting box varies based on the conditions. So on a light air night, right, you don't want to get too far from here because the starting box is actually going to be shallower. When we have more wind, you can have more speed, this box is a little bit bigger. But it's not a square like traditional starting box. These are the lay lines. This would be close haul, point of sail to make the boat, close haul to make the pin.
To me, one of the videos we showed a boat that had to bear on and come back up because they were too far over. Sometimes people think that they think that it's a rectangle, like they think they're going to be fine here, but they're going to miss it here, right?
Yes, and currents do play into this. The wind shifts can play into this, but we're going to do a lot more of that detail in the next discussion. We just want you to get a visual of what that starting box is. Generally, you want to be in the starting box in the sequence. If you are way outside the starting box, and that 3 minute, unless we have really high winds, you're going to be too far from the line no matter what you do. So generally, we have people just kind of milling around in the starting box figuring out some of their stuff.
And when John talked about timing his speed to the line, I think you're timing it on close hull, and that's when you're going to figure out what your ley lines are too, right? And so that's starting to get an idea of where you need to be.
Right, so if you know that this is a minute, it's going to take you a minute from whatever point you found to the line. If you're coming in port or starboard, you want to be turning towards the line in that minute. If you wait for 30 seconds, you're going to be too far. If you turn too early, you're going to be at the line too early. So that starting box is just something to always be considering when you're prepping for your race.
Did I just go?
Can you go
Yeah,
back
back
just
to
one, real quick one time?
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I had the phone upside down too. Yes.
So there's the pin. It's tiny, but you can see it. Here are the. Oh, there's the flag. Look, you can see it. Tell me what pennant that is.
And so these boats are roughly on that ley line.
Yeah, Dirk Hill was trying to do Dinky Sisters.
Everybody slowed down there because they were too early.
Everybody's too early.
You turn right now. Go, go, go. Perfect.
Okay, this one caught out too far. Went too far that way before turning back. Yeah, those guys.
And we're going to talk about what the effects of all of the clean air afterwards are on that.
It's funny, I was wondering which boat I was on, then I remember I was flying a drone.
I was with you on these.
That was me.
I think we should take a break. Well, do we need a break or do we want to keep going?
Break.
Okay.
Break.
All right, so this is a funny thing while you go.
5-minute break.
I was listening.
All right, so now really what we want you thinking about is to form a plan, right? So you're out there, you know that the whistles are coming, right? So think about where do you want to cross this line, and then how are you going to get there? There's really the two questions that you should be looking at when we get out there. Yep.
Other way.
Okay. So if you have discovered that the line is horribly skewed, then consider starting there. But if everybody has figured it out, guess where everybody's going to try to start, right? So then there is some value to being away from a crowd, especially in lighter air, because that air is going to be so disturbed. And generally, we break the line up into thirds. So at the boat third, so that third of the line, you are generally coming in on starboard, so you'll have some starboard rights. It's generally an easier approach to make, especially if you've reached in and reached out, or if you're down here a little bit deeper. But it's very crowded. There are a lot of boats that are trying to what's called win the boat and be that one boat. One boat will nail it, and then the other 4 or 5 are in, bumper boats and dirty air. So you can also consider the pin third, which is often less crowded. The ley line, if you get to the ley line at the boat third early, you have some wiggle room, right? You can just fall off and stay below the line and then pop back up. The same is not true on the pin end, because then you're going to sail yourself off the course. Also at the pin end, especially in a shorter course, you could then be restricted in that it's not going to be easy to tack back across the fleet. Where on the starboard end, that's generally another advantage is to be over there. And then there's the middle third, which is almost always less crowded, unless people are early and other kind of, but you have lured rights in there. Sometimes it's harder to call the start line. So if you're good at line transits, so those sight lines, and you know where that line is, then a midline start can be very successful because you'll be in clear air. Anything else? So that's where, that's your first question. Am I going to go for the mid? Am I going to go for the boat end? Am I going to go for the pin end? And then, how are you going to get there? You really only have two choices. You're either going to come in from the starboard side or you're going to come in from the port side.
And what I'm going to suggest is, as we think through this, we're talking about doing this in reverse, because it's the way to think about it. You're going to start first about where do you want to cross the line? Then you're going to back up a step and go, okay, so how am I going to get to that point where I'm going to cross the line? And when we talk about the port approach and the starboard approach, I think we're really talking about the last 40 seconds to a minute, right? It's like in that last
3-minute window.
Of that 3-minute window, like that 3-minute window you might be sailing around. It's in that last 40 seconds. Are you coming in from starboard or are you coming in right?
From port. So this would be coming in from the starboard side. You have right of way. It is easier to be a full speed, but it is crowded. So the crowded is the downside to that. This is a port approach, which is different from port tacking the fleet. So port tacking the fleet, you're going to try to cross the start line on a port tack, which we want to discourage for the most part. But a port approach is you're just coming in from port, and you're looking for an opportunity to tack to starboard, and then you'll hit the starting line on starboard. You have no right of way when you are doing this, except other boats. Yep.
So, one time we had an issue, I was sailing with Jamie, and somebody was
Was that
coming.
you?
Was that the issue? No. We were not wrong. But so somebody was coming on this port approach, and they were gonna starboard tack. Their plan was the turquoise plan.
Yes.
And our plan was, let's say, the pink plan, but shifted over.
Yep.
And so I think what they were trying to do was flip onto that starboard tack
Right.
fast enough that they had that we have the right of way moment.
Yes.
But they were doing it so late that there wasn't time for us to do anything.
Correct.
And so I don't know, it was a complicated moment.
Yes. So if you're going to bring
when we talk about fouling and
Yes.
honoring and
that would have been a
spinning
foul on
and
that.
all of those
You had right
things.
of way.
Yeah, so it's
So
just,
if
I
you're
think
going
it's
to
a
take
little
the port
complicated.
approach, you have to know you don't have rights, and you have to understand the rainbow, and that you've got to have a understanding of how much room you need to tack to get to your new starboard close haul, because then you would be lured. But
Right.
you can't tack into a boat, you can't tack on top of a boat.
So if let's say someone was doing the turquoise.
Yep.
The port approach,
Yes,
like the second that they find close hauled, but
on starboard now.
right now on starboard, they have right of way, but there's that subjective, I mean
Yes.
somewhat subjective.
Yes,
Well, so,
because,
like, I remember that night, right?
Yeah,
Because what we ended up doing is we ended up ducking them,
we did, yeah.
right? And even though we had rights, we could have yelled and screamed.
Right,
We were faster to duck and keep going,
right,
but we were a little bit late from what we wanted to do.
right.
But it is the thing, I mean, that technically would have been a foul, technically that, right? So port approach takes a little bit more skill, but there's advantages to it, right?
so you get a good look at what's happening in the fleet, who's already there, who's on starboard. You need to find a hole to tack to starboard in. Sometimes that hole isn't there.
Yeah.
So the port approach is harder. It's a little riskier. It requires a lot more mindfulness of how much time and space do I need to tack, because you're also slow into that tack, coming out of it. But it's an option. So some boats come in from the right, some boats come in from the left.
Yeah, and another night that I was in, I would suggest if you were at the last thing, make sure that you also know if you're doing the port approach, that you're gonna be cutting back over, and there might be other boats coming in, right? And you wanna make sure that you give them time to avoid you. Not that that happened to any of us, right, so.
And then your other choice is how close are you coming to the line. So you can come in shallow, which you're close to the start line, so that's good. But if you're too early and you have to slow yourself down, remember these don't accelerate very quickly, that can be a little risky. Lighter winds, you want to be shallow, because you want to be close to that line. Or you can come in a little bit deeper. If you come in deeper, you often have better speed, but you can run into a lot of disturbed air, or unfortunately, if a whole bunch of shallow boats, even if you have right away over them, if they don't give you that, then your race is kind of screwed up. So it's a little riskier to go too deep. That timing is a little trickier, but if you've been running in that 5 minutes before, if you've been running this and you have a good sense of how far away from the line you are, then the deeper approach can be beneficial because you could be at speed where other boats are trying to slow themselves down and you will roll them.
And you're gonna get to see this in a second, but the thing you're gonna watch for is if you're coming in with speed and you've got some maneuverability around those boats and you're watching them ahead of them, you can roll over them pretty fast. You just wanna make sure that you have space to do it, so.
And also on a port tack, you have to be careful because your jib is gonna block a lot of the view of those starboard tack boats coming at you.
Especially your helmsman, but you have 2 other people on that boat and one of them needs to be looking underneath that jib.
Yeah, though,
Because that's
you do have to watch how you're getting blocked that way, but I would actually say that you have a better view of what's developing when you're coming in from
on
port.
the
So
shallow one or the
actually in both places, I think.
Coming in from the port.
On the port, because coming in from the starboard side, it's hard to see the boats around you.
Yeah, but starboard has right of, I mean,
Yes.
it's your
But
responsibility.
you've got a windward lure problem to
Right.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's your
yeah,
responsibility.
yeah.
Yep. But those are really the questions. While you're out there, you're what third of the line am I going to go over and how am I going to get there? Am I going to come in from the right or the left? And how close to the line am I going to come in? And with just those 3 pieces, you are in good shape.
So, so I guess you're saying that if the wind is light, it's better to be close. And I have obviously heard that over and over again, but in my mind, it still doesn't make sense to me because it feels to me like if the wind is light, you really, and you're shallow, then you're gonna turn up, it's gonna take forever to get to speed. Whereas if you're deeper, if the wind is light, you have plenty of time to get the speed before you get to the line.
Yes.
So that's why I'm a little confused, like
Okay,
why is shallower better and lighter wind?
Because if you get caught too far down here,
Yeah,
there's nothing you can do. You can't go any faster. You're slow. So now if
There are other boats more shallow than you.
It's gonna take me 30 seconds to get to the start.
yeah,
Even
or
shallow.
2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. We had a
Yeah.
frostbite race where like 2.5 minutes even to the start, we're still not there.
If you're shallow, you might be going into reach and you may be able to get more speed than if you were in a close hole trying to fight your way directly upwind.
And shallow, I mean, a low wind night coming in from port, you've got the tack problems. You have to tack much earlier. So the port approach on a low wind night becomes a little bit more dangerous. But the dirty air, we'll see in the video, on a low wind night, if you are deep and there's a bunch of boats above you, there's one video where you'll see a boat sort of sit at the start line for like 20 seconds.
Okay.
Is this it? Do I
One of
have
them, yep.
double tap it?
So we want to make sure you're looking at, these are two boats that are going to do well. This boat's coming in on what Molly talked about, the port approach. This boat's coming in on the starboard approach. They're both classically doing a good job of what.
See, now that's plenty of space to get over onto your close haul. Pink now has to avoid blue. Blue is lured.
And blue is coming up tight on that ley line. They're lured, so right, so
That's a brilliant move on pink though, because now who's lured?
Now pink.
Pink is lured, so.
Yeah, we need a fake to the left there for some reason.
but if you remember at the beginning of that blue boat that was on port approach looked like they were way behind a bunch of other boats, but they did a nice tack, kept their speed up, and then they ended up rolling all of those other boats. And like so, looking at this point of the thing, those two boats that looked like they were behind other boats are way ahead of the rest of the fleet.
Can you show that again?
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't do anything actually. Jamie's the tech guy.
Wow, that is wild.
It looks like the person behind them has the same plan on it.
Yeah, so there's 3 or 4 boats that are all coming in
Who's
from.
that other boat way over by the pin?
That's the one that missed the countdown. Actually, they might be fixing.
And so like navy blue looks like they were just too deep. They were trying to do the same thing, but they came in too deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that white one just going across and not turning upside.
And see, orange is tacking when the starting whistle's going off. So now they're slow and they're
Yeah, but the one that's-
far back there.
Yeah.
But what?
And sometimes it happens, if you have a strong
So,
flooding current.
right, so I've been like that white boat.
Yeah.
We've all been that way.
We've all been that way, but,
Yes.
and the issue now is that they can't tack across until everybody else goes. I mean, even if you get across first, if you're closer to the
I mean,
pin,
this one.
yeah, if you're closer to the pin and everybody has to tack before they can get to the mark, you can get across first, but then you're just hostage to waiting for everybody else to go.
So there is a starboard advantage on a normal upwind fleet when a short course where we can't do a lot of tacks in the Rainbow. But they were talking about in the back about this white boat that looked like they were a little bit late, but they had such clean air. If they hold, I mean,
They stretch
we'll
out
talk in
the
the
fleet.
next time. They're actually not pointing super well. And this might have been us.
It feels very familiar.
These two boats are pointing much better, and as this video goes out, the distance between these increases. But this white boat was in decent shape to roll everyone, and even if they had to tack below blue, they could have tacked in front of all of these boats with good speed. And so they would have been. It was actually a really good start for white.
New video, right? Or no? That's the same one.
Yeah, I just needed to get it. Yeah.
I don't know if I did it or not. That's a different one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a different one.
But you can see the boats split. Some are coming in from the,
Yeah, I'm just gonna back it on it for a second.
okay.
So just want to capture that green boat, the green starboard boat, is doing a really deep approach when Molly talked about shallow versus deep.
This, oh, you got a green circle
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, the one in the
Yeah.
green circle.
And so right now, it looks like that green boat is behind 5 or 6 boats.
But you got 40 seconds.
Watch your speed. Like,
Clean air.
this is the deep with speed, but your timing has to be right on.
And those lure boats could be pushing that green boat up, but they're not.
They could, but they're
They
too
get
early, so
close
they're
to the
actually
line,
slowing
they
them.
get there to the line too soon.
Yep.
And then here they do run into that issue here.
Because
They're
they're all
already
having
past
to
the
fall
boat.
off because they're too early.
Should have good clean air.
because everybody else was so early, they're now down the line.
And the start was actually about 4 seconds before I'm showing it. You can tell when both the boats turned up. But those two boats, first across the line, both of them are close on with good speed.
Clear
Both of
air,
them, yeah.
green is in great shape.
Right, yeah, that red circle boat really did that port approach and management. They hunted for a good spot and they made their turn, but. it was
Yeah,
tight.
the port approach is actually my favorite, but every once in a while, like, there's no hole there.
There's nowhere to go.
Did you want to do it again?
I think this one's yours, go.
So, last thing, you've got your plan, you've done all of those, as many of those tools as you have time for, right? So you figured out where the line sights are, you figured out how fast you're going by timing the line, you figured out the favorite side of the course, you looked at the conditions, you put all of those things together to come up with an idea of where do I want to cross the line, how do I want to get there in that last 30 seconds. Now ideally, you've done that with 3 or 4 minutes to go, and so Ian's suddenly doing his come hither, multiple whistle gather, and you have some time now actually to practice. So to me, one of the things I try and make sure that we're doing with the crew out there, practice some taps and jives, and you're going to be doing that while all of these things are happening. You might want to continue to do that counterclockwise loop of the line. You're watching, because what often happens to us on a lot of these nights is there are big wind shifts, right? The wind dies down. You suddenly thought you were going to be able to start 45 seconds below the line by 8 boat lengths and make it. Now suddenly you're never going to make it there, right? Because the wind just died down. Or the wind has shifted, and when you thought the boat end was favored, now the pen end is favored, right? So you're watching for those things to happen and continuing to sail back and forth. And then you're getting yourself set up for that last minute where you're doing your port or starboard approach. But you're also remaining flexible. You're watching the rest of the fleet. You figured out the line's square. The rest of the fleet's way over here. I'm going to shift to come in from the port and go for the pin third because I'm going to have clean air and a lot more flexibility. Right? So that's the last part that we're looking for in the space. You were going to say?
Oh, no, I'm just talking to myself.
Might win that argument.
I do the same.
All right, any questions on starts, starting tactics, strategy, plan, timing? Timing is just a matter of getting out there and practicing.
So some of us go out and create a line with one of the speed buoys and just practice, seeing how often you can make yourself hit that, figuring out a line from it, giving yourself a chance to, just develop that memory of how fast the rainbow turns, how fast you can get the rainbow to accelerate.
I do have a question. I guess I need clarification at the start. There's 2 boats on starboard, one's leeward, one's windward, and I'm coming up to the start, and the leeward boat pushes me up, but I'm gonna hit, if I go up, I'm gonna hit
what?
both.
Okay, so you can shut the door if you are the leeward boat, but you have to do it before the windward boat is inside the committee boat. You have to do it and give them an opportunity to tack away, which we have slides to show.
You want to go to the slide?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a good one. That's a very common scenario.
So actually, yep, you got it right. Back barging.
Yes, okay, so
You
here we
wanna
go.
do-
Oh, actually, they were queued up next, Donna, thank you. Okay, so who has right of way, blue or orange?
Blue.
Blue. Blue is hailing leeward. The hail is not required. You in that orange boat are supposed to know that that turquoise boat has right of way.
Because they hail.
No. Because they're leeward.
They have it. They have it.
This is all dependent on the speed. So if the orange boat gets to the boat before the blue one, then it has the rights.
Only if the orange boat, the blue boat doesn't have to change course. Right.
So here, well, we have the slides for it. So
Yep.
blue is advancing, orange is advancing. Does blue have to make way for orange?
No.
Here, no.
Well, no, once orange is up and can start to head upwind, it has rights.
We'll get there. So right now, blue can block this. This is
Yeah.
shutting the door.
Yeah.
Orange can either duck them
Yeah.
or tack away.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 choices. Orange cannot just go in there because they would also like to start this race.
Yeah.
We hear that sometimes, they're like, well, I wanted to start too.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I feel like
Which
that's
is-
a
But
very
if
common
orange,
scenario.
if orange was ahead of blue in that particular scenario, it would have rights.
How far ahead?
Based
do you
on
have
what?
to be?
What rights would it
If you
have?
beat them, you mean, if
It
you can't.
it beat them
push
to
me into
the,
the
it
boat.
beat them to the pin end.
Okay,
to the-
so
the-
this is what we call barging.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but
that's
then there's a
fine.
big however, right? So now here, I think this is, Jason, where we're getting at with you. If blue isn't doing it, isn't closing the door, or isn't over there enough, and orange can fit there without having
But-
blue
but-
change
but
her course,
We said there's no proper course, right?
there's no proper course
Yeah,
before
right.
the start.
So, the first person to the boat, who establishes rights at the boat, is the first, it has the rights, right?
So, it would be rule 16, you can't change course, you can't force a boat into a mark or into another boat once they're there.
So I think the difference between, Jason, what you're saying and what I'm hearing potentially for people is, say we're coming in here, if this boat's coming in faster,
Yeah.
right? If this boat can clear without this boat ever changing course,
Yeah.
then that's fine.
Yeah.
If this boat gets in and is still here, but it's gonna cause this boat to have to change course,
Right,
then it's a foul.
right, I get that.
Yep. If the point at which, so coming in here, if this boat decides to protect it by coming up,
Yes, that's wrong too.
nope,
Nope, that's right.
that's right, because this boat's lured and there's no proper course.
Oh,
This is the important part, so this boat can defend, and this is what Carrie is talking
That's
about.
closing the door.
Yeah.
And I think these slides show that. Watch this. So here, you can close the door because orange has an opportunity. They're not overlapped with a committee vote. But here you cannot. So if orange gets inside there,
Right, no,
no,
yeah,
Because
that looks fine, but, yeah.
all right.
But
It just,
Why-
there's a point of where
I'm out of
that
time.
that
That's
changes,
zero
time.
that changes, right? Where exactly is that?
I think it's the point at which, to me, from the rules committee, and Ian, Molly, whoever, the point at which this boat has to change course, and this boat had a choice, then it's a foul on the lured boat.
Okay.
The point at which the green boat can't get away, it's no longer a foul, then the green boat has rights.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes.
So on
Yep.
this line, the yellow has crossed the line.
But Molly said that in that case on the board there, the blue can't force green into the pin.
Right, once this boat can't get out of that, once this boat can't tack in either direction,
But it's kind of their fault for getting into that situation.
It doesn't matter. So back here is where the blue boat has to be saying lured, don't go into that space, lured, no space.
Okay,
And
though,
then if green continues to go in, that's a foul on green.
but if green hits the pin, it's blue's fault?
no, not in this situation. If this boat had a chance to get away,
And chose not to.
and chose, yeah, and the hail's not necessary,
But
So wait,
once
so,
they're here, you can't do this because they have no opportunity.
but that's still a foul,
But,
right? I mean, you can't,
Foul
so
would be
if
on
this
fluid.
boat is coming in,
Yeah,
okay, and not changing course, and this
Okay.
one decides I'm gonna stick myself in there anyway. And now this one has to give way because we can't push him in. This one's still foul by
Yes.
Yes.
sticking himself in there, so you
Yes.
could still say that's a foul, and this guy comes, oh,
Yeah.
sure, fine, all right, I do a thing.
right.
yeah, that's what happens in our league.
That's why the road
There's a clear point somewhere in there where that it all changes, right? I guess that's the really important part to figure out.
Which again is why the hailing comes in really important, because if you are that lured boat and you warn that other boat, first of all, you're warning them right in front of the race committee. Now, we have had this, we have video of this, I am in the lured boat yelling, like, and they still went in there. And then
I
they
guess
like-
the point I'm thinking is that once the green boat, in this case, establishes its new course, right?
so to me, it's not the green boat establishing. If the green boat, if the green boat should have known that they can't get in there, even if they do get in there, they're still a fault. Right? The difference is if say the blue boat was here and there was space, the blue boat can't turn up at this stage, right? So then the blue boat can't turn up, But if the blue boat is never gonna have to turn up, the green boat can't get into a situation where the blue boat is forced down.
And when's the last opportunity for the blue boat to close the door?
So, we talked about knowing the ley lines.
Uh-huh.
One of the reasons to know the ley lines is because Carrie has been encouraging me to do this, right? If I'm on this ley line,
Uh-huh.
right, I'm essentially, and we're coming in such that this green boat's not gonna pass through me, I'm closing the door,
Okay.
right? Because I'm never gonna change course, and this boat can't get through, without creating a foul.
But
But if I'm faster in that green boat than the blue boat,
You
then
have
I
to
get
get
in.
you have to be all the way through.
Okay.
If you cause the blue boat to have to change course, you're still following.
So you've got a point, and it's about right there, where you realize you're not gonna get past them, and you're in that green boat, and you've got to pass.
I think the point is that the door
Or
can be
shut.
shut. The door can be shut. The door can be closed, and yet the green boat can still go in there, causing the foul.
Yes.
So that's where it's like, because you were fast enough to get in front of me, but you weren't fast enough to get
All the way through.
all the way through. So I'm gonna have to render rules, not hit you, but
Yeah, and Molly's thing about with closing doors, say that I'm below the ley line, I can luff up without going head to wind to come up to the ley line and force this boat. Like if I'm down here, there could be space for both of us to go through. But what Carrie would say for closing the door is I should turn up at this stage and cause this boat to realize that they can't come in. And I'm still going to maintain some speed because I've got speed even if I'm pinching at this stage. Right? And so that turn up is the closing of the door.
So if they foul, if the green boat fouls the blue boat has to change course. Would they technically have to do a penalty?
The green boat?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The green boat, and you want to duck, ease the main, just to give more turning power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so, and the avoid collisions thing, one of the biggest things to remember is if you don't ease the main, you make it really hard to duck or bear off. So a smart thing for this boat to do is just to slow down and to duck and to get in here. And then one of the things we can talk about next time is there's an advantage to being close on the leeward side because you're giving this boat bad air.
Right.
So getting into this position, even though you've given up the boat, can be just as good. We will add one more thing that Molly would like to have talked about to this, maybe. Go forward. Last important part to the barging thing. So the trap that we then end up in is you keep thinking you should close the door, right? But it's not always the smartest thing to close the door. So say in the situation Donna keeps bringing up, what was the green boat, is fast coming through, and you could close the door. Like you could maintain your speed, you could come up, right? You might want to slow down just a bit. If coming up faster and closing the door either slows you down too much so that you're going to mess up your start, or you want them past you this way so you avoid the collision, and then you can keep your start going. So there's a lot of times, Stuart Walker talks about it as slow up and win, right? There's a lot of times when your better move is not to enforce your rights, or not to go faster to block someone out. It's to just let them go through. And so you'll see, like we've had this, in the celerity, where someone's going to be coming in, you could force them to tack, but instead the smart thing to do is to wave them through, so that you get to keep sailing your plan and get them out of the way.
Which is true that day that
Yep.
that was true.
Yeah. So we we're not quite to 2 hours yet. We've got some additional stuff to do with clean air if you guys want to keep going through to it.
Yeah.
So the last part of figuring out starts, and really the next part of the course, is figuring out where bad air is. And I think for a lot of us, we assume the dirty air is just straight down from the boats in front of us. You know, if the wind is Jason, and I'm sailing this way, a lot of us just go, oh, that must be where the dirty air is coming from, but there's a boat there, that's what I have to worry about. In reality, that's not often where the dirty air is. And so, the part about learning about it, there is that blanket zone, right, that comes back from the boat. You know, it's directly behind the boat, it often goes many boat lengths, but it's the blanket zone. But there's a larger backwind zone. There's a larger space that essentially is to windward of you. So a boat to leeward of you is giving you a much larger bit of bad air. And not only is that bad air disrupted, that bad air is essentially a header, right? That bad air is like a wind shift that's pushing you down, right? So if you have two boats, this is why when we talk about the starts, having a boat to leeward is dangerous to you. Because this boat to leeward, if you're going at the same speed, is pushing that blanket zone here. They'll go faster than you, and they'll shoot ahead of you. There's also a dome of air that goes over the boat that disturbs things right around it. So this entire collection of stuff becomes the space that you need to be watching for bad air.
How many boat lengths is, I mean, it depends on the wind speed, right?
You know, what would you say is how many boat lengths?
It depends on which one of those three you're talking about. Direct to leeward, like blanket, is 10 times your mast height.
Wow.
So,
10 times.
wow. Yeah. So if you can have what they call soft cover on somebody where you're above them, you're not really affecting them that much, but you'll still be hurting them. The blanket zone is like, it's like 3 times your width. It's not that much.
Wait, so the blanket one is the one behind?
The blanket one's the one coming out this way.
So you say that again? Can you say it like?
Sure.
follow the term?
So the blanket zone is like 3 times your width. So maybe 1 or 2 boat lengths to windward, or okay, sorry.
Let's go back a couple slides.
Which was the one that's 10 times your mast?
Go back to that one more. This one.
Oh.
But this one's 10 times your mast, but gets smaller.
Right, it gets narrower as you get further away.
And people think of, I mean, this is what everyone thinks of.
Sure, yeah, that's for sure where you think it mostly is.
But there's in geographic area, there's a larger area of bad air here, even though it doesn't extend as far.
This one's 3, and the other one's 10.
This is 10, depending on the type of boats.
You can see the slot between the head sail and the main. You're in that zone.
Yes.
And you can see the slot between the head sail and the main.
Of the other boat.
Other boat.
Interesting, okay.
But it gets very narrow.
Yeah.
And in heavier wind, it's shorter.
Okay.
Yes.
In lighter wind, it's bigger, which is one of the reasons why being in light wind below the start a long ways is worse. Because there's a bunch of boats creating
And you
that
think
bad
they're
weather.
way ahead of you, but you're still in that.
Yeah.
And this one is much bigger, but it's like
That's far out.
not as far out. Right.
Yeah, so this doesn't quite capture how far down that goes.
Right.
And if you're close, does that flatten the upwind boat, their sails, and affect the way that they're?
It gives them a header.
Yeah.
So it's like a boat. The boat is constantly it falls down to the point where it can't live there anymore.
Gotcha.
So your boat falls behind and gets pushed.
Right. Exactly what happens. And they have to end up having to tack away.
I think it's important to point out that the advantage to being in that position, in that windward position is you can, especially if you're, the furthest to the windward boat, you can peel off, you can get out away from that.
Right, and you're not trapped.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, been trapped.
So this gets to how do you tell, right? Once you start not being able to point as well, it's because you are getting that header and you're getting the dirty air. You can look at the relative wind vanes. So your wind vane is going to start pointing into that dirty air, because that's why all the boats have wind vanes.
That was laughing.
Do they?
That was an hour.
Will they?
You start falling back, and you're going to see this in the videos, you start falling back behind boats, right? And you're like, why are they going better than us?
Yeah.
Right? It's because we often play follow the leader,
Yeah.
right?
Wow, this is my favorite.
Yeah, so when you look at this one, you can tell that green largely has clean air because they're far enough away. Well, they're lured of pink, so they're not getting bad air because they're not directly behind. Right? Pink is in good position because they're far enough over. Yellow's getting crushed. Right? Blue might be far enough back over, but there's a lot of disturbed air that's heading in here, right?
And purple can just, that's what you were saying, Ian, purple has the opportunity to just tag out of there.
Yeah. So this
Like,
purple.
they're in bad air, but they're free. They're
Yep.
unencumbered by other boats, so
Yeah.
just get out.
But, you know, yellow's not in a position, if yellow tries to duck and tack,
Yeah.
and purple tacks, so yellow's in orange, and both are in a,
They're both in trouble.
yeah. But watch how this develops. So this is the start we watched before, right? So this was the port approach boat and the starboard approach boat. And then watch what happens after the line, after they cross the line, for these boats that are behind them. And so like yellow here starting to,
Fall behind.
yep. And so I think one thing that we talked about for, you know, why improving our starts is so important is because this stretching out of the fleet that happens in that first minute or 2 minutes is often most of the distance between us at the finish line.
Uh-huh.
Would also point out, these boats are pointing better than these boats. We'll talk about that next time.
Are they pointing better because they're in clean air?
Where are you going?
Well, they're tacking out to get out of it. So at some point on that beat, the effectively the windward mark is here. So by falling off, it felt like they were totally falling off, but they were going close hold on the other tack. And at some point, everyone needed to do that. So staying in that position and not tacking away, they were just slowly falling behind. So tacking over and go ahead and taking the, you know, so questions on whether you think yellow or orange should tack?
They should definitely tag.
Yellow, yes, orange, no.
Why orange no?
Because what
Yellow
we're just
should,
talking
orange
about,
should wait to see what yellow does.
Yeah.
so what we're just talking about, the principles of being close upwind to a boat that's immediately downwind of
Yeah, so if yellow tacks
you. Yellow's in the clear.
and orange tacks right away, they're still going to stay in their shadow.
Right. And the turquoise is going to affect the orange boat as well, because it's going to be close.
Because they're going to continue on up. So part of this is learning to watch for a lane of clean air, right? So yellow was in a bad zone, but if they tack, there's no one that's going to be affecting them to have that lane of clear air. Where if orange tacks, they're going to potentially get bad air from yellow, if yellow tacks too. And we often see this happen, is that people will, you'll be following the boat on the way out, you know that you need to get to the next windward mark, you'll see the boat ahead of you that's been giving you dirty air tack, and that triggers us to go, oh, I should tack too, because I need to get over to get to that mark. And a lot of us just tack straight into another zone of bad air. So, another one of our starts. We'll show the same thing. So this is the effect of a relatively lower wind night. Watch how slow these boats that are further back from the start line, because they're getting all of this bad air. Hey, Ian, can you hit the space bar?
Ian, can you hit the space bar?
I can't hear you over my cheesy music.
I like your cheese music, Joey. that we've been entertained by the collision, we can watch the dirty air situations. And then it's hard not to, it's like literally hard not to watch the slow moving tracks.
Blue was just sitting there.
You know?
He was just, couldn't go anywhere, he was not moving.
So I want Ian to tell us which boats are getting dirty air and which boats should tack.
Which boats are getting dirty air, which boats should tack?
So this is gonna be on the exam.
Well, sometimes you just have to live with it. But I'd say these guys have clean air.
Everyone sees the windward mark is up here.
Right. They're all, pink's almost laying, right? White is pinching for some reason right there. I don't know why. I think they're fine. They should have clear air. Yellow, I think, is far enough to leeward that they've got clean air. Because you have to imagine the wind is coming from where, if you have a Windex at the top of your mast, that's where you're looking for your dirty air. It's not directly upwind, right? So it's not here. So their Windex, their Windex will be pointing like here. So I think they've got clean air. This boat's got dirty air from pink. Green might have a little lane there, but they're getting a little dirty air from white. Red's probably got a clean lane. Blue's getting dirty air from red. So, but then again, you're almost laying the mark. So if I'm in blue, I'm kind of like, and I'm probably getting a little dirty air from pink still too. So in that bubble area. And these boats are all, they can't tack because they're all pinned by blue. Maybe green could get around if they wanted to. So, if I was blue, I'd probably take a short hitch, maybe, but it's also light. You could see big areas of no wind and very light wind, so then you don't want to tack. You want to live, kind of want to live and keep going. So
if I'm going to let this go a little bit further.
Well, if they weren't pinching, they were tacking.
You're attacking, okay, that's good.
Because they weren't gonna make the mark.
I think it's great advice, live and keep going.
Advice for life.
So now they just got knocked, well, it's also the camera changing, so it's easier to see the knock.
Okay.
So blue's down now, right? So I think, and this looks like it's tacking, so that's the right thing to do. As soon as you get a knock, especially if you're in a bad spot, right? You don't like where you are, you're getting bad air, and now you've got, I always call it like, don't only have one reason to tack, right? Especially in a rainbow. You want multiple reasons. So I'm in bad air, and now I just got a header. All right, well that's enough. That's 2 reasons, let's go. But if just one reason, I'm in that air, maybe not enough reason, because it costs so much to tack in a rainbow, right? It's a 3-4 boat length loss every time, unless it's really blowing. Go ahead.
Explain got a header.
What was the number of reasons? 30 reasons to fall off. You're headed is one of them, right? So
Wind is going like this. I'm in my close haul, right? If the wind shifts this way,
right,
what happens to my course?
Adjust to it.
Yeah. So in this case, to stay at 45 degrees to the,
Oh, I see.
it pushes me down,
Uh-huh.
pushes the bow down. So if I'm going to this mark here, we call that shift a header because it heads me away.
Right.
And then a lift is the opposite.
So if the wind shifted this way, I'd be able to go higher. And so that's a lift because it's going to make it easier for me to get to my mark.
Okay.
So headers push you bow away, lifts let you go up. So the simple version is headers are usually bad for you, and lifts are usually good for you. You, on a persistent header that might cause you to miss this mark, like say that you were going to make the mark here, and you got headed, at some point you're going to have to tack over to still make the mark.
Right, right.
Right? Whereas a lift might make it easier for you to make the mark, and so you come down and sail a little bit faster.
And if you're headed and then you tack, then you're gonna be lifted. right?
So a header on one tack, on the opposite tack is lift. So that's why on a header, you often think about tacking. Or if you are planning to tack, and you just aren't sure when you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it in like the next 10 boat lengths, you might wait until that, if the wind has been shifting a bit, you might wait till that header happens. Or if you just got lifted, you might stay a little bit longer. Headers and lifts get a little more complicated at some point when you're considering your position via the other boats, and sometimes it's good to get headed.
Can I borrow a few hands to help move two boats?
And we are actually
Yeah.
looking again.
Right now?